Good evening and thanks for joining us. These are extraordinary times, and we begin tonight with a couple of political firsts. A federal speech from the throne delivered in the middle of a pandemic, as well as an address to the nation by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. He declared that a second wave of COVID-19 is underway in Canada's 4 biggest provinces, and he said time is running out to turn it around.
We're on the brink of a fall that could be much worse than the spring. I know this isn't the news that any of us wanted to hear. It's all too likely we won't be gathering for Thanksgiving, but we still have a shot at Christmas.
The Prime Minister said Canada is at a crossroads and appealed to all of us not to let our guard down on public health restrictions like masks and physical distancing. And he repeated some of the lines from the throne speech delivered earlier today. Never has a throne speech been delivered in the middle of a pandemic. Masks, physical distancing, far fewer MPs present than usual. The leader of the opposition was not there, nor was the leader of the Bloc Québécois. Both have COVID-19 and are self-isolating. It is 2020, and the virus is certain to dominate politics in the months ahead. There was a great deal of talk today. For more detail, let's go to Abigail Bimman in Ottawa. Abigail, start with the Prime Minister's address to the nation tonight.
Well, Donna, in that address, the Prime Minister began with a stark picture of where we are. He said when the country entered lockdown in March, there were 47 new cases. Yesterday alone, there were more than 1,000. Trudeau then moved into all of the major further investments he's promising in the throne speech, defending his decision to keep spending money.
I know some people are asking how we can afford to do all this for Canadians. That's fair. Low interest rates mean we can afford it. And in fact, doing less would end up costing far more. Doing less would mean a slower recovery and bigger deficits in the long run.
The throne speech laid out lots of plans to spend, but offered no financial details. Immediate help in the fight against the virus was the first of 4 pillars in that throne speech. Have a look.
This is not the time for austerity.
Anything but austere. There's a long list of promises, many we've heard before. But there's never been a throne speech during the COVID-19 pandemic. As cases climb, the Liberals are offering immediate help for things like faster testing.
Canadians should not be waiting in line for hours to get a test.
And more money for businesses forced to close through potential new targeted lockdowns. The government will extend the wage subsidy through the summer, revamp EI, and help specific industries such as travel and hospitality. The speech offers national strategies for long-term care, housing, pharmacare, creating a child care system, and a disability benefit program.
They've promised pharmacare since the late 90s and has not been achieved. They've been really good at saying the right words, but not so good at actually delivering the action.
The government will launch a campaign to create over 1 million jobs.
On the much talked about green shift, the Liberals say climate action is the cornerstone of that jobs plan.
Canada cannot reach net zero without the know-how of the energy sector and the innovative ideas of all Canadians, including people in places like British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Newfoundland and Labrador.
They plan to legislate that goal of net zero emissions by 2050 and stick to their promise to ban single-use plastics. And in a broad-ranging speech, they've recommitted to reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, fighting systemic racism. They even call for Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, detained in China, to be brought home.
Conservatives cannot support it. It is another speech that is full of Liberal buzzwords and grand gestures with very little to no follow-up plan.
Now, Conservative leader Erin O'Toole also addressed the nation tonight, but did so from outside his home. He's in isolation after testing positive for COVID-19 along with his wife. Tonight, O'Toole appeared to be in good health.
Today, Mr. Trudeau told millions of Canadians that building back better doesn't include their family. I believe we need to build back stronger as a country. We must be more resilient and self-reliant for the future.
Abigail, it felt a little bit like election talk, even though it seems talk of a fall election has vanished. This is a minority government, though. How will this parliament function in the pandemic, especially given the leader of the Conservatives and the Bloc both have COVID-19?
Well, just minutes before we heard that speech from the throne, we learned there's an agreement between parties for a hybrid parliament going forward. For now, MPs will vote remotely by video. There is an app for that in the works, and there's no date yet scheduled for that confidence vote. Donna?
All right, Abigail Bimman in Ottawa, thanks. And our Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stephenson is standing by. Mercedes, no federal government has had to navigate through a public health crisis like this. The Prime Minister asked tonight for time on all the networks to speak directly to Canadians. What struck you about what he said?
Well, Donna, what struck me was what he said off the top, the level of concern he was expressing about those increasing numbers. And I think there's no doubt that the Prime Minister wanted to send a very serious message that people have to stick to their careful measures, washing your hands, wearing a mask, maintaining social distancing. He warned that otherwise we are looking at a fall that will be far worse than what we saw in the spring, and that if there's any hope of having a shot at Christmases together, we will have to crack down now. I think that was a very clear message from the Prime Minister, and similar to the type that we saw him delivering earlier in the pandemic when he used to speak to Canadians outside of his house every day. But then there was the throne speech 2.0 element of all of this, where he basically reiterated all the things Abigail just briefed us on, arguing to Canadians that the federal government has their back. Therefore, you can stay home, you can relax, let us take care of everything. But no doubt, that was an opportunity to make sure that those words came from the Prime Minister's mouth and are quoted and not the Governor General's.
Mercedes, the Prime Minister asked Canadians tonight to stay strong, to work together to keep the COVID numbers from rising any further. Are our federal political leaders likely to work together as well in this next session of Parliament?
I suspect they will, at least initially, and we'll have to see where this all plays out because, Donna, as you know, in politics, a very difficult thing to predict. We do know this. The Conservatives will not support the throne speech. They've already said that. Yves-François Blanchet put down an ultimatum tonight saying if the federal government doesn't give Quebec health transfers with no strings attached, he'll vote against it. Well, that leaves things in the hands of the NDP. They've said that they want paid sick care and an extension of the CERB. That's certainly not out of the realm of possibility for the government. They only need one opposition party to back them, and there's certainly a sense that Canadians aren't looking for an election in a time where we're seeing these pandemic numbers increasing. Donna?
All right, Mercedes Stephenson, thank you.